The conference I just went to, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. The theme was changing the world through personal healing, and I have a bone to pick with that. It's the same thing that bothered me about Lynn McTaggart's book, The Bond, which is all about, bonds between groups of people, because they skip families. We always seem to go from, okay, let's get ourselves personally well, and now we'll go heal the world. And it doesn't work that way. Damaged institutions create damage in families. They raise damaged children, and they grow up to damage more institutions, and it's a vicious cycle. And we cannot ignore the families. Family systems work in the old style had to get the real family members into the room, which has in many ways, I think, been its downfall. It's just much too hard to do that. And if you do get the real family members, physically in the room, they're not willing to talk for, many, many sessions to get them willing to talk. Whereas with a constellation, we can, in some sense, channel the structure of groups, human groups, on pretty much any level: organizations, ancestral families, birth families. And I'm also going to be talking to you about your own inner family, because you are a kind of coalescence or competition of personality parts. You experience them often as just different points of view, sort of in your mind. But they're built on the family template. In fact, everything that goes on in all human groups is in some sense built on a family template. The templates of the main players are what determine what's going on. Anybody who's trained as a business coach will tell you that, and anybody who does organizations will tell you that. So we really have to stop this cascade of trauma. And to do this, we need to see ourselves as social organisms who form, quote, families, unquote, that are embedded in one another on different scales. Now, the book and this course are the only thing that I know of that, give you lists of techniques and likely stages, and in addition to some fairly profound theory or whatever you want to call it. So the big vision is this. We link ourselves into social group intelligences. We have something called a social empathy system. This is hardwired in our neurology. The social empathy system is the first thing that works in a newborn baby, and it's already cranking. It's working. When you smile at a child, that child smiles back because that child has mirror neurons. It doesn't really have an intellectual understanding of what's going on, but we are wired up to hook into one another in social groups, and these social groups, they are largely unconscious. If we look at the level of organizations, ancestral families, birth families, and individuals, what's going on is trauma scales. The word scales means it behaves the same on different levels of size or complexity. Trauma is doing pretty much the same thing on all these levels. It cascades. What that means is damaged institutions create damaged families, which create damaged inner families and individuals who grow up and create more damaged institutions, and it's just a vicious circle, and it's a huge one. When I was first exposed to Mark Wolyn's training, family constellation training, and we started to see over and over again these horrifying genograms, just filled with trauma of all different kinds. I really had a painful kind of vision that all the chaos in the outer world, all the power struggles, the greed, the weapons manufacturers, our political system, all that chaos is mirrored in the family in terms of these traumas. And the two of them are basically hand in hand supporting one another. Trauma does the same thing on all four scales. It disconnects our subconscious social group intelligence from our rational behavior. We'll be going into all this in great detail. Another way that trauma scales is that in personal, in terms of your inner family, trauma emerges later in individual lives. There's a drive for wholeness. In ancestral families, it emerges in later generations. But it's doing the same thing. It's hanging around in the system, and it comes up for healing. And I think we are doing one more here, and then we go back to looking at my face again. The method here really is very simple. I've been 4 years now, I've been about 8 years in family constellation work. It saved my life. You'll see that when you start reading the book. And four years now heavy into energy psychology. So what I'm calling family energetics, it's like dysfunctions on any level, organizations, ancestral families, birth families, or your inner family of personality parts. They are tangles of confused, competing parts bound together by some shared purpose. They're part of some organism and they really need to work together. But for various reasons, trauma leaves them disconnected from one another and unable to work together. So if energy psychology techniques work when you just sit down with a person and you start working on personal trauma or whatever, if they work, that's great. But if they don't, or if they're slow, or if the changes don't last, or if you have this strong sense that it involves, and ancestors as well as just the individual person, break out the key parts. I mean, that's what a constellation does. In the most general sense, it looks for the key players in some kind of dynamic that's blocking the client. Client has some goal, the client has some desired positive change that he or she would like to see happen, which has been difficult to achieve. A constellation sets up, breaks out into people or objects on a tabletop. It breaks out a pattern of ancestors or inner family parts or both. So we set up the goal, we set up what's blocking it. What's blocking it maybe turns out to be mom, and so on. And we arrange these parts in space, and we give them the space so that we can tap on who needs what. I have a client, I spent probably about a year with the client. She had a kind of 6-year-old part that was just really badly abused and in freeze mode as far as our sympathetic nervous system. I mean, she was really shut down and in pain. She had a 12, 13-year-old just around puberty that raged, that was violent. And she's a brilliant coach. She's a very accomplished woman. And yet in her private life, she's struggling with these parts. So it doesn't take much to figure out that the 6-year-old, we need to tap on, even though I'm overwhelmed and scared and don't know what to do, I deeply love and fully accept myself. And the 12-year-old, we need to tap on, even though I'm furious and I'm enraged and it comes out sometimes when it's inappropriate and I don't know what to do about it, I deeply love, and we're doing EFT or EMDR or something like this on it. And then what people forget about a lot of the time is that the outside person who's trying to have the life, who's somehow supposed to be the guiding light of this, is struggling with these inner people. Like I've had it, here I am after dinner, I shut down and get really scared, or I get inappropriately angry at some client or some situation. Well, if you see yourself as a single being in that situation, it's not much help. You're basically an entangled, muddled whole that can't get out of its own way. If you break the parts out, then you know that the outer self really needs to tap on, even though these two are causing me trouble, I realize I need to show them some compassion because this is what they experienced, and in some sense it's their heroic perseverance that's responsible for us being here at all. And so I'm going to try for some compassion here, and I deeply love and fully accept myself. Tap, tap, tap. So what we're doing really is, this is a very nice way to combine energy psychology and constellations. And not just family constellations, any kind of constellations. What you're doing is you're sort of breaking this entangled whole apart. If you're good at it, you will pick out the key players that are creating the tension, and you're letting them clear. You're letting them speak. They're letting them say, you're always the little one that's all frozen. It's like, I'm very scared. I collapse. I don't like what we're doing. It's too scary for me. The outside person needs to yeah, okay, I hear this, but it's over now. Tap, tap, tap. That's really the method in general. Let's stop this now.